It was a cool autumn evening when my friend Carter and I decided to explore his family's rural property in Michigan. The air was crisp, and the leaves crunched under our feet as we pulled our bikes out of the garage. The setting sun cast an orange glow over the landscape, and we could hear the distant rustling of leaves in the wind. We had plans to do some off-roading and explore the vast fields and forests that surrounded his home. But as night approached, we stumbled upon something that would change our lives forever. "Hey, let's check out that old church up the road," Carter suggested, his eyes glinting with excitement. The church was an abandoned structure that had long been rumored to be haunted. Growing up, we had all heard the stories, whispers of mysterious figures lurking inside, strange sounds echoing through the night, and eerie lights flickering in the windows. To be honest, the idea of exploring the church both thrilled and terrified me. With flashlights in hand and a few snacks stuffed into our backpacks, we hopped on our bikes and made our way down the narrow, gravel road that led to the church. As we rode, the darkness enveloped us, and I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. The trees loomed over us like silent sentinels, their branches swaying in the wind, casting twisted shadows on the ground. As we approached the church, the air grew still. The building stood at the end of a long, overgrown path, surrounded by tall grass and weeds that seemed to sway and curl like fingers reaching out. The structure itself was a weathered relic, its wooden planks cracked and peeling, and the steeple had long since lost its cross. I felt a mix of excitement and unease. It was as if the church was waiting for us, beckoning us to uncover its secrets. We parked our bikes and crept closer, the beam of our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The heavy wooden doors were slightly ajar, creaking ominously as we pushed them open. Dust motes danced in the air as we stepped inside, the faint smell of mold and decay overwhelming us. The interior was dimly lit by the moonlight streaming through broken stained glass windows, casting colorful yet haunting patterns on the floor. "Let's check out the altar," Carter whispered, his voice barely audible. I nodded, though my heart raced. We made our way deeper into the church, our footsteps echoing in the silence. As we approached the altar, I felt an inexplicable sense of dread settle over me. Something was off. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, aiming my flashlight toward the source. There, sitting in one of the pews, was a shadowy figure. My heart dropped. "Carter! Did you see that?" I stammered, my voice shaky. "See what?" he replied, his brow furrowing as he turned to look. I pointed to the pew, but when we both looked, the figure was gone. It was just a shadow in the dark, or so we thought. We exchanged nervous glances, both trying to convince ourselves it was just our imagination playing tricks on us. "Let's just take a quick look around," Carter said, attempting to sound brave. As we moved cautiously toward the back of the church, the hairs on my neck stood up. The sense of being watched intensified, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. Suddenly, I heard a soft thud, like something heavy falling to the ground. My heart raced as I turned to Carter, who looked just as pale as I felt. "What was that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Before he could respond, we heard a faint rustling sound, followed by what sounded like footsteps. "Let's get out of here," Carter said urgently, grabbing my arm. We bolted toward the exit, but as we reached the door, we were met with another chilling sight. The figure we had seen earlier was now standing by one of the broken windows, staring out into the night. Panic surged through me as we dashed into the cold night air. "Run!" I shouted, and we sprinted into the cornfield that bordered the church. The tall stalks swayed and rattled as we ran, the darkness swallowing us whole. We could hear the figure pursuing us, its footsteps growing closer. Fear clawed at my throat as I urged myself to run faster, adrenaline fueling my every move. We finally burst through the edge of the field, our breaths ragged and our hearts pounding. I glanced back, but the figure had disappeared. We stumbled toward the gravel road, gasping for air, and without a second thought, we pulled out our phones to call Carter's dad. He answered quickly, and we explained the situation in frantic whispers, our words tumbling over each other in a rush of fear. "Stay where you are! I'll come and get you!" he said, his voice steady and calm. We waited by the roadside, shivering in the cold night air, casting worried glances back toward the church. I couldn't shake the image of that figure from my mind, the way it had seemed to just materialize out of thin air, almost as if it had been waiting for us. When Carter's dad arrived, we practically leaped into the car, thankful to be away from that cursed place. As we drove back home, the fear began to settle, but the questions lingered. Who was that figure? Why was it there? And what had we really stumbled upon in that abandoned church? The next morning, the sun rose bright and cheerful, illuminating the Michigan countryside and dispelling the remnants of the night's terror. But for Carter and me, the fear was still fresh in our minds. We sat at the kitchen table, each lost in our thoughts as Carter's dad brewed a pot of coffee, the comforting aroma filling the air. "Are you boys ready to go back to that church?" he asked, his tone light but serious. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach at the thought. "We need to figure out what's going on," he continued. "You both can't just let it eat at you like this." Carter nodded, the determination evident in his eyes. After breakfast, we gathered our flashlights and a camera, something to document what we might find. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows, and we made our way back to the church, the gravel crunching underfoot. My heart raced with a mixture of dread and curiosity. I couldn't help but replay the events of the previous night in my mind, each moment becoming more vivid and haunting. When we arrived, the church stood silent and foreboding against the blue sky. Carter's dad parked the car, and we stepped out, the chill of the morning air sending shivers down my spine. We approached the building cautiously, the weight of our previous encounter heavy in the air. "I'll go first," Carter's dad said, taking the lead. We followed closely behind, our flashlights piercing the shadows as we ventured inside once again. The interior looked just as we had left it, dust swirling in the air, the sunlight filtering through the broken windows. But this time, we were not as easily shaken. We made our way to the back of the church, where the altar loomed, and Carter's dad shone his flashlight around, looking for any signs of life, or anything unusual. Just as we were about to give up, I spotted something on the floor, partially hidden beneath a pile of debris. "Hey, over here!" I called, crouching down to get a better look. It was a worn leather jacket, old and tattered, and it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Carter's dad examined it closely, frowning. "This doesn't belong to anyone from the area. It looks like it's been here a long time." We searched the surrounding area, hoping to find clues about who might have left it. Then, Carter's flashlight beam caught something shiny among the rubble. He picked it up, revealing an old pocket watch, its glass cracked and its hands frozen in time. "This is weird," Carter said, turning it over in his hands. "It looks like it belonged to someone." Just as we were piecing things together, a loud crash echoed through the church, causing us all to jump. "What was that?" I gasped, adrenaline coursing through my veins again. "Let's stay calm," Carter's dad said, trying to reassure us. We cautiously moved toward the source of the sound, our hearts racing. As we turned a corner, we found a door that had swung open, revealing a dark stairway that spiraled down into the unknown. "Should we go down?" Carter asked, his voice wavering slightly. "I think we have to," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. With hesitant resolve, we descended the creaking stairs, the darkness wrapping around us like a thick blanket. The air grew colder, and the silence was deafening, broken only by our cautious footsteps. At the bottom of the stairs, we entered a small basement room, the walls damp and covered in graffiti. Old crates were scattered around, and in the corner, I noticed a strange symbol carved into the wall, a figure that looked remarkably similar to the silhouette we had seen the night before. "Do you see that?" I whispered, pointing to the carving. It looked almost like a person with elongated limbs, standing eerily tall. As we examined it more closely, we heard a low, mournful sound echo through the room, making our skin crawl. "Who's there?" Carter's dad called out, his voice echoing in the darkness. The sound stopped abruptly, replaced by an unsettling silence. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and I felt an inexplicable sense of dread wash over me. Then, out of nowhere, a chill swept through the room, and we all froze as a figure emerged from the shadows, the same figure we had seen in the church before. It stood at the entrance to the room, cloaked in darkness, its features indistinguishable. Before I could scream, Carter's dad stepped forward, shining his flashlight on the figure. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice firm but shaky. The figure shifted slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in its eyes. "Help me," it whispered, its voice hauntingly familiar. I felt my heart drop. "What do you mean?" I stammered, taking a cautious step back. The figure pointed to the wall, its finger trembling as it traced the outline of the symbol. "I've been trapped here for years. They won't let me leave." The weight of its words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. "Who?" I managed to ask. But before the figure could respond, a loud crash reverberated through the room, causing the floor to shake. The lights flickered ominously, and the figure vanished into thin air, leaving us in stunned silence. Carter's dad grabbed my shoulder. "We need to get out of here," he urged. We turned and sprinted back up the stairs, our hearts pounding in our chests. When we reached the main floor, we stumbled out of the church and into the daylight, gasping for breath as the fresh air hit us. "What just happened?" Carter asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know," I replied, trying to process everything. "But we have to tell someone. We can't just leave it like this." As we made our way back to the car, I felt a strange mix of fear and determination. Whatever we had encountered in that church was real, and it was far from over. We didn't just find an abandoned church. We had uncovered something sinister, something that wouldn't let go of its grip easily. That night, we reported everything to the authorities. The police were skeptical, but they agreed to investigate. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and unanswered questions. The more we thought about it, the more we felt an unshakable connection to that figure. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had left something unresolved. I often thought of the figure, and its plea for help. Was it truly trapped, or was there something darker at play? Then one stormy night, while I lay in bed, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Carter. "You won't believe what I just found." My heart raced as I read the rest of the message. He had discovered more about the church's history, an old newspaper clipping that detailed the disappearance of a man years ago, a man who had been last seen near the church. My stomach churned as I realized the man's name, Elliot Hargrove, a name that echoed in the very depths of my mind. He was the figure we had seen, trapped in the church, reaching out for help. The truth was more horrifying than I had ever imagined. We weren't just dealing with an abandoned building. We were entwined in a tale of loss, desperation, and darkness that spanned decades. What happened to Elliot? Why was he still there? And most importantly, could we ever free him? These questions haunted me as I prepared for whatever lay ahead, knowing that the mystery of the abandoned church was far from over, and the truth was waiting to be uncovered. My name is Jason Caldwell, and I want to tell you a story that has haunted me for the past 5 years. I grew up in a small town called Hillcrest, nestled in the heart of Nebraska. The town was peaceful, surrounded by endless fields of corn and patches of wildflowers that painted the landscape with vibrant colors during the summer months. Hillcrest was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and rumors spread faster than the wind. But this tale isn't about gossip. It's about something that lurked in those vast, green fields, something that I can never forget. It was late summer, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cornfield near my childhood home. I had just turned 18 and was eager to enjoy the last days of freedom before heading off to college. My friends and I often gathered at my house after school, but on this particular day, they had all gone home. Feeling restless, I decided to venture out to the cornfield, a place where I had spent countless hours playing hide and seek as a kid. The towering stalks whispered secrets in the breeze, their rustling leaves beckoning me to explore deeper. As I walked through the rows of corn, I felt a strange sense of nostalgia mixed with an inexplicable unease. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow that filtered through the leaves. I remembered how, as children, we would dare each other to run to the farthest end of the field, our laughter echoing as we dashed between the stalks. However, that day was different. A heavy silence hung in the air, and the vibrant colors around me faded into an ominous gray. I wandered farther than I ever had before, curiosity propelling me deeper into the heart of the field. As I navigated through the dense rows, I began to notice that the stalks seemed taller and thicker than I remembered. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic that made my stomach churn. I paused, glancing around, and realized I had lost my bearings. The sun was setting quickly, and I knew I needed to head back before it got dark. Just as I turned to retrace my steps, I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was a low, guttural whisper, like a voice carried by the wind. I strained to listen, but the words were indistinguishable. My heart raced as I stood frozen in place, every instinct screaming at me to leave. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. The stalk swayed gently, but then I saw it again, an outline, dark and tall, shifting between the rows of corn. Panic surged through me. Who could be out here in the middle of nowhere, in a field as vast as this? I called out, my voice shaky. "Hello? Is someone there?" Silence answered me, thick and heavy. I took a step back, ready to bolt, when I heard it again, this time clearer, closer. "Jason!" The whisper sounded eerily familiar, yet utterly foreign. I couldn't comprehend how anyone could know my name. My mind raced as I tried to recall if anyone had come with me, but I was utterly alone. Instinctively, I turned and ran. I sprinted through the rows of corn, the stalks brushing against my arms, scratching my skin. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, a drum echoing the fear coursing through me. As I raced through the field, I glanced back, half expecting to see someone chasing me. But all I saw were the rows of corn, swaying in the twilight, as if mocking my panic. Finally, I broke through the last row and stumbled onto the dirt path leading to my house. I glanced back one last time, my heart pounding in my chest, but the field appeared innocent, serene under the fading light. My lungs burned as I sprinted to my front door, slamming it shut behind me. I locked it, as if that would somehow keep whatever I encountered at bay. That night, I tried to shake off the feeling of dread, convincing myself it was just a figment of my imagination, a trick of the mind brought on by the solitude of the cornfield. I grabbed a snack and plopped down on the couch, flipping through the channels on TV to distract myself. But sleep eluded me, and as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. The following days passed, but the unease lingered. Every time I stepped outside, the cornfield loomed in the distance, its tall stalks swaying in the breeze, whispering secrets I could not understand. I began to notice that even the birds had gone silent, and my friends seemed uneasy whenever I mentioned the field. I confided in my best friend, Sarah, who lived down the street. She was skeptical at first, laughing off my experience. "Come on, Jay. You were probably just spooked because you were alone," she said. But as I recounted the whispers and the dark figure, her expression changed. "Maybe we should go out there together," she suggested, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. That weekend, we decided to explore the cornfield together. Armed with flashlights and a sense of camaraderie, we approached the field. As we stepped into the rows of corn, the atmosphere felt different, heavier, charged with an energy that sent shivers down my spine. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting elongated shadows that danced between the stalks. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me, but I pushed it aside, trying to stay brave for Sarah. As we ventured deeper into the field, I recounted the events of that fateful day. I could see the worry etching lines on her forehead, but she remained resolute, determined to uncover the mystery behind my experience. We took turns shining our flashlights, illuminating the rows of corn that seemed to stretch on endlessly. It felt like we were stepping into another world, one where time stood still, and the only sounds were our footsteps and the rustling leaves. Then, just as we reached the spot where I had first encountered the whispers, we stopped. A chill ran through the air, and I could feel Sarah tense beside me. The whispers began again, but this time, they were clearer. "Jason! Sarah!" The voices seemed to swirl around us, echoing between the stalks. My heart raced, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "We need to go!" I shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm. But before we could turn to leave, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall silhouette standing just a few feet away. My heart stopped. It was not a person, but a dark, indistinct shape that seemed to blend into the darkness around it. I couldn't make out any features, but I felt its gaze piercing through the dim light, locking onto us. It was then that I realized it wasn't just the whispers that terrified me. It was the way the figure seemed to absorb the light around it, becoming a void in the otherwise vibrant field. I pulled Sarah with me, sprinting back through the rows of corn, our footsteps pounding against the ground. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of unintelligible words that filled the air with dread. We burst out of the field and onto the dirt path, not daring to look back. As we reached the safety of my house, I slammed the doors shut and leaned against it, breathless. Sarah's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "What the hell was that?" she gasped, her voice shaky. I could only shake my head, speechless. That night, we sat in my living room, our hearts still racing. We tried to rationalize what had happened, but deep down, we both knew it was something we couldn't explain. I spent the next few days in a haze of fear and confusion, unable to shake the feeling that whatever we had encountered in the field was far from ordinary. The figure remained etched in my mind, and the whispers haunted my dreams, filling my nights with dread. As summer waned and fall approached, I couldn't help but feel that the cornfield held a secret, one that was waiting to be uncovered, but at what cost? As the leaves began to turn and fall, painting the landscape in shades of orange and brown, I tried to push the memories of that day from my mind. Yet, I found myself drawn back to the cornfield, a magnetic pull that I couldn't resist. It was as if the very essence of the place was calling to me, urging me to return. I confided in Sarah, who was still shaken by our experience, but she agreed to join me once more. We set a date for a Saturday afternoon, determined to face whatever lay within the field. The air was crisp that day, and the sky was painted in soft hues of blue and white. As we approached the cornfield, a strange tension filled the air, a mix of anticipation and dread. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the memories of the figure, and the whispers flooding back. As we stepped into the field, the world around us seemed to shift. The corn, now a darker green, loomed over us, taller and more intimidating than before. The atmosphere felt charged, thick with an energy that prickled at my skin. The sun hung low in the sky, casting elongated shadows that danced between the rows, making it difficult to tell where the light ended and darkness began. "Are you sure we should be doing this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to muster courage. "We need to know what's out here. We can't let fear control us," I replied, though my voice trembled with uncertainty. We walked deeper into the field, the familiar rustling of the leaves now a haunting reminder of the whispers we had heard before. With each step, I felt a growing sense of unease, as if the field itself was alive, aware of our presence. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the same spot where I had encountered the figure. My heart raced as I recalled the whispers calling my name, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. As we stood there, I felt a chill in the air, the temperature dropping inexplicably. The once vibrant colors around us seemed muted, as if the life had been drained from the landscape. "Jason!" The voice came again, softer this time, but unmistakable. It echoed around us, reverberating through the rows of corn. I felt a surge of panic, and Sarah instinctively took a step closer to me. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice steadying despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "Show yourself!" The field grew silent, the whispers dissipating into the cool air. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the figure emerged once more, stepping out from behind the towering stalks. This time, it was clearer, more defined, but still shrouded in darkness. Its form was human-like, but something about it felt profoundly wrong, as if it were a distorted reflection of a person. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the figure, my mind racing. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to sound brave, though my voice trembled. The figure tilted its head slightly, and in that moment, I saw its eyes, or at least where its eyes should have been. There was nothing but an empty void, a darkness that seemed to pull me in, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, paralyzed by fear. "Jason! Sarah!" The voice was a chilling whisper, almost a melody that echoed in the air around us. "You should not have come back." At that moment, a rush of memories flooded my mind, images of laughter, childhood games, and the carefree days spent running through the cornfield. But mixed with those memories was a darkness, a sense of loss that clawed at my heart. "Leave this place!" I shouted, finally breaking free from my paralysis. I grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her away as we stumbled backward. The figure stepped closer, its form shifting and distorting as it moved, a grotesque dance that left me breathless. The whispers intensified, surrounding us like a storm, each word a claw digging deeper into my psyche. "You cannot escape. You belong to the field." With every step we took back, I felt the weight of the figure's presence behind us, a dark shadow that loomed in the corners of my vision. The whispers crescendoed, becoming a haunting symphony that echoed in my ears. The world around us blurred, and I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet. "Run!" I screamed, and we bolted through the rows of corn, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The whispers became a chaotic cacophony, drowning out everything else as we sprinted for the edge of the field. The corn stalks closed in around us, but we pushed through, desperate to escape. Just as we reached the outer edge, I glanced back, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the figure standing among the corn, its void-like eyes locking onto mine. A chill shot through my spine as I turned away, focusing on the path ahead. We burst out of the cornfield, collapsing onto the dirt path, our hearts racing. I slammed my hand against the ground, trying to catch my breath as Sarah sat beside me, her face pale with fear. "What was that?" she gasped, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I replied, my voice hoarse. But it felt alive, like it was feeding off our fear. We sat there for a moment, the adrenaline slowly fading, replaced by a heavy sense of dread. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field, and I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on us. As we made our way back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we had encountered in the field was just the beginning. The whispers echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder that the cornfield held secrets I had yet to uncover. In the days that followed, I tried to put the experience behind me, but the whispers lingered, weaving their way into my dreams, taunting me with their promises of knowledge and despair. The figure had planted itself in my mind, a dark specter that refused to let me go. I began to research the history of the cornfield, diving into old newspapers and town records, desperate to find answers. What I uncovered was both intriguing and terrifying. There had been strange occurrences reported in the area for decades, disappearances, whispers in the night, and sightings of dark figures lurking in the fields. Some locals believed it was a curse, a malevolent force that fed off the fear and despair of those who ventured too close. I shared my findings with Sarah, who listened intently, her eyes widening with every revelation. "Maybe we should warn people," she suggested, her voice low. "If it's been happening for years, who knows what could happen next?" But I hesitated. Part of me felt compelled to return, to confront the darkness that had consumed my thoughts. I needed to understand what was happening in the cornfield, to uncover the truth hidden within the whispers. As fall settled over Hillcrest, I made my decision. I would return to the cornfield one last time, but this time, I would go prepared. I gathered flashlights, a camera, and a notebook to document whatever I encountered. Sarah was hesitant to join me again, but I insisted, believing that facing the darkness together would help us both find closure. That evening, as twilight settled over the town, we made our way to the field, the air thick with anticipation. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rows of corn. My heart raced as we stepped into the field once more, the familiar rustling of leaves surrounding us. As we walked deeper into the cornfield, I could feel the tension in the air, the whispers rising once again, intertwining with the wind. "Jason! Sarah!" the voice called out, luring us closer to the heart of the field. We pressed on, determined to face whatever lay ahead. The atmosphere in the cornfield had shifted once again, the energy palpable and suffocating. As we walked, the whispers grew louder, wrapping around us like a fog. I could feel Sarah's tension beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, though my heart raced with uncertainty. "We have to know the truth." We moved deeper into the field, the rows of corn towering over us like sentinels, watching our every move. With each step, the whispers morphed into a rhythmic chant, a sinister melody that echoed through the darkness. "Jason! Sarah! You should not have returned." The voice was clearer now, resonating with an otherworldly quality that sent chills down my spine. Suddenly, the figure emerged from the shadows, more defined than before, its presence exuding a palpable energy that felt both alluring and terrifying. Its form shimmered in the dim light, an unsettling blend of shadow and substance that made it hard to focus on. "Why have you come?" it asked, its voice a haunting mix of curiosity and menace. "We want to understand," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "What are you? What do you want from us?" The figure tilted its head, the void where its eyes should be seemingly searching my soul. "I am a keeper of secrets, a guardian of this land. The field holds memories, memories of those who have come before you." "What memories?" Sarah interjected, her voice steady despite her fear. "Fear, despair, loss," the figure replied, its voice echoing like a distant thunderstorm. "Those who venture here are drawn to the darkness, and it is my duty to guide them." "Guide us?" I questioned, confusion mingling with terror. "Guide us where?" "To the truth," it whispered, the wind carrying its words like a haunting lullaby. "But be warned, the truth comes at a cost." I exchanged a glance with Sarah, uncertainty swirling in the air between us. "What kind of cost?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure took a step closer, the shadows around it swirling like smoke. "To uncover the truth, you must confront your deepest fears. Only then can you understand the nature of this place." A chill ran through me as I realized the weight of its words. "We're not afraid," I declared, trying to sound resolute. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I felt a wave of doubt crash over me. The whispers grew louder, filling the air with an overwhelming cacophony of voices, each one echoing my insecurities and fears. I could feel the ground tremble beneath my feet, and a sense of impending doom settled over me. "Face your fears, Jason," the figure urged, its voice now a low growl that reverberated through the air. "Only then can you free yourself from the chains that bind you." As the whispers crescendoed, I felt a surge of energy pull me toward the figure, my heart racing as my mind flooded with images of failure, loss, and despair. I stumbled forward, caught in a web of emotions that threatened to consume me. "Jason!" Sarah shouted, but her voice felt distant, like a whisper carried away by the wind. The figure reached out, its shadowy hand brushing against my skin, and in that moment, I was transported into a vision, a swirling vortex of memories and nightmares. I saw moments of my life flash before my eyes, the laughter of friends, the warmth of family, but also the pain of heartbreak, the weight of expectation, and the fear of the unknown. "Confront them, Jason!" the figure urged, its voice echoing in my mind. "Only then can you escape the shadows." I found myself standing in front of my fears, each one taking shape as a ghostly apparition. I could see my younger self, filled with hope and dreams, but also standing beside the darker versions of myself, my insecurities, my doubts. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaky but growing stronger. "I am not afraid of you." "Are you not?" The shadows laughed, their voices merging into a sinister chorus. "You cannot escape the truth of who you are." In that moment, I realized the figure wasn't just the guardian of the field. It represented everything I had buried deep within myself. My fears, my regrets, and my failures. "Face me!" I shouted, determination coursing through me as I stepped forward, confronting the dark apparitions. "I will not let you control me!" As I embraced my fears, the shadows began to dissolve, their hold on me weakening. I felt a surge of strength coursing through me, as if the very essence of the field was empowering me. "Jason!" Sarah's voice broke through the chaos, grounding me in the moment. "You can do this!" I turned to her, seeing the fear in her eyes, but also the unwavering belief she had in me. With her support, I faced the darkness once more. "I am not defined by my fears," I declared, my voice rising above the whispers. The shadows shrieked as I pushed through the darkness, a light igniting within me. I felt the weight of the figure's gaze, but I didn't flinch. "You have no power over me!" I shouted, my voice strong and steady. And just like that, the shadows shattered, dissolving into wisps of smoke that vanished into the night. The figure before me flickered, its form wavering as if it were struggling to maintain its presence. "You have chosen the light," it whispered, its voice now tinged with a hint of sadness. "But know that the darkness will always linger, waiting for the moment of weakness." "I will be ready," I replied, a newfound confidence coursing through me. With that, the figure dissipated into the air, leaving only a lingering echo of its whispers. The cornfield around us began to shift, the vibrant colors returning as the darkness receded. Did we do it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I think so," I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "We faced our fears." As we made our way out of the field, I could feel the weight of the whispers lift, replaced by a sense of peace that enveloped us. The moon shone brightly above, illuminating the path ahead, and I knew that the experience had changed me forever. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a shift in the town. The whispers that had haunted me seemed to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of community and resilience. I realized that facing the darkness within myself had not only freed me but had also illuminated a path for others to follow. I shared my story with the people of Hillcrest, encouraging them to confront their own fears and embrace the light within. Together, we transformed the cornfield from a place of dread into a symbol of strength and unity. A reminder that we all have the power to face our darkness and emerge stronger on the other side. And though the whispers may return, I now know that I have the strength to confront them. The cornfield, once a source of fear, became a sanctuary, a place of healing and growth where I could reflect on the journey I had taken. Growing up, my brothers and I spent most of our summers at our family's vacation home in a little town called Hollywood, South Carolina. It wasn't anything fancy, just a mobile home on the edge of some farmland, surrounded by woods that seemed to stretch for miles. The kind of place where you could disappear into the quiet for hours. Our parents loved it for the peace and quiet, but for us, it was an endless playground. The fields, the woods, and the scattered old buildings made it feel like our own private world to explore. My brothers, Luca, the oldest, then me, Oren, and my two younger brothers, Jasper and Iver, would always spend our time outside, climbing trees, running through the woods, and making up games to pass the long summer days. Our favorite, though, was hide and seek. We'd pick one of us to be the seeker, and the rest would scatter like shadows across the property, hiding in all the nooks and crannies the land had to offer. But there was one place we always dared each other to explore, the abandoned house about half a mile from our home. It sat on the edge of a cornfield, a small, dilapidated building that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. No one ever talked about it, but something about that place made my skin crawl even in broad daylight. One summer afternoon, when the air was thick with the scent of crops and the buzzing of cicadas, we decided to play hide and seek near that house. We'd never gone that far from the mobile home before, but being kids, we didn't think twice about it. Luca was the seeker that day. As the oldest, he always played his part with more intensity, making everything feel like a real adventure. He started counting with his eyes closed, leaning against one of the old fence posts near the road. 1, 2, 3. Luca's voice drifted as the rest of us darted off. I ran straight for the cornfield, its tall, green stalks forming a perfect hiding place. The corn was thick and rustled with every step, and I felt safe there, knowing I could move around without being seen. I crouched down, catching my breath, and waited for Luca to come looking. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the field, but the thrill of the game kept my nerves in check. That's when I heard it, the soft crunch of footsteps on the dry ground behind me. At first I thought it was Luca, so I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath. But something was off. The footsteps weren't hurried or deliberate like his would have been. They were slow, almost hesitant, like whoever, or whatever, was walking didn't want to be heard. I turned my head slowly, peeking between the stalks. All I saw was the endless maze of corn, waving gently in the breeze. But the sound continued, getting closer. My heart raced. Luca couldn't have found me so quickly, and I knew Yver and Jasper were hiding somewhere else. I decided to make a break for it, figuring I could run to the shed near the house and hide there instead. I bolted from the cornfield, my feet pounding against the dirt as I reached the small, weathered shed. I crouched down behind it, breathing hard, waiting for the footsteps to fade. But they didn't. They stopped. I glanced back toward the field, half expecting to see Luca grinning, ready to tag me. But he wasn't there. No one was. The corn rustled in the breeze, but the footsteps had stopped as soon as I left the field. It was like whatever had been following me disappeared the moment I stepped out. Something wasn't right. A few minutes later, I heard Luca shouting, "Got you!" as he found Jasper and Yver near the house. I came out of my hiding spot, still shaken by what I'd heard. We all regrouped, laughing and bickering about who had the best hiding spot. I kept my mouth shut about the footsteps. Maybe I was just imagining things. As we walked back home, the sky turning a dusky purple, I asked Luca if he'd been near the cornfield. "Nah, I stayed closer to the house," he said. "Why?" "No reason," I mumbled, not wanting to seem paranoid. That night, when we got back to the mobile home, Dad was sitting on the porch, smoking his usual after-dinner cigarette. We told him about our game, how we'd played near the abandoned house. He frowned. "No one's lived in that place for years," he said, almost as if he was talking to himself. A cold shiver ran down my spine. No one lived there? Then what, or who, had I heard in the cornfield? The rest of that evening was uneventful. We ate dinner, watched TV, and eventually crawled into our bunks, exhausted from the day. But as I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching us. Something that wasn't one of my brothers. The next day, though, the weirdness of the previous evening was pushed aside by the thrill of another adventure. We decided we were going back to that old house, this time after dark. It was Luca's idea, of course. He was always the brave one, the leader who got us into all kinds of trouble. And being his younger brother, I wasn't about to back down. But Yver, the youngest, didn't want to come. He was only 8 at the time, and nights in the country can be pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows everything whole. So, it was just the 3 of us, Luca, Jasper, and me, armed with flashlights, as we made our way through the woods toward the cornfield again. I could feel the tension between us. It wasn't just the excitement of playing in the dark, it was something more, something heavier. Maybe it was because we all knew, deep down, that there was something strange about that place. The night air was thick, the kind of stillness that amplifies every sound. We could hear our footsteps crunching on the gravel road as we walked back toward the abandoned house. I held my flashlight tightly, its beam cutting through the dark, revealing only more shadows ahead. Luca led the way, of course, with Jasper following close behind. As we neared the house, I hesitated. There was a feeling in the pit of my stomach that something wasn't right, but I couldn't place it. Luca stopped at the edge of the cornfield, grinning at me and Jasper. "Alright, you guys ready for flashlight tag?" We nodded, but I could sense the unease in Jasper's expression. He glanced toward the dark rows of corn, the stalks swaying slightly in the night breeze. I tried to shake off my own nerves. It was just a game. Luca held up his flashlight, the beam flickering as he waved it toward the old house. "All right, I'll be the seeker this time," he said. His voice was steady, but I could tell he was just as keyed up as the rest of us. There was something about playing in the dark that made everything feel different, more dangerous, like the shadows themselves had grown teeth. "Count to 50, I said, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. Luca nodded, and without another word, Jasper and I ran off in different directions. I glanced over my shoulder as Luca pressed his hands to his face and started counting aloud. 1, 2, 3. I bolted for the cornfield. Something inside me told me it was a bad idea, but my legs carried me there anyway. The tall stalks loomed like silent sentinels, their leaves whispering in the breeze. Once I was deep enough inside, I crouched down, the soil damp beneath me. The darkness felt alive around me, the rows of corn creating a maze that twisted in every direction. The flashlight in my hand seemed weak, almost useless, as I turned it off to avoid being seen. The air smelled of earth and something else, something faintly metallic. I tried to focus on Luca's counting in the distance, but every little noise made me jump. The wind moved through the corn, a low rustle that sounded too much like footsteps. For a moment, I considered running back to the house, calling it quits. Maybe I could hide near the shed again, like the day before. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not Luca's. His would have been faster, more deliberate. These were slow, dragging almost, as if someone was moving cautiously through the field. My heart began to race, each beat pounding in my ears. I stayed perfectly still, hoping whatever it was would pass by without noticing me. But the footsteps kept getting closer. I slowly flicked on my flashlight, pointing it toward the direction of the sound. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow path between the stalks. I scanned back and forth, expecting to see Luca's face pop out, grinning. But there was no one. The footsteps stopped as soon as my light hit the area. I held my breath, staring into the shadows. The quiet was oppressive, like the entire world was holding its breath with me. Then I saw it. A figure, just at the edge of my light's reach. It wasn't moving toward me, just standing there. I couldn't make out much, only that it was tall, a man maybe, but something about the way he stood made my skin crawl. His head tilted slightly, as if he were watching me. I stepped back, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Luca?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, unmoving. And then, in the silence, I heard a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, but clear enough that it sent a chill down my spine. "Can I play with you guys?" I froze, the words hanging in the air, each syllable dripping with something dark and wrong. The figure took a step forward, just one, and I saw the flash of something pale in the light. A face, deformed, or maybe it was a mask. I couldn't tell. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing fast enough. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the game anymore. I didn't care about Luca or Jasper. I just ran as fast as I could, crashing through the corn, the stalks tearing at my skin as I bolted toward the house. I could hear footsteps behind me now, faster, louder, like the thing was chasing me. I didn't dare look back. Every part of me was focused on getting out of that field. When I burst out into the clearing, I nearly ran straight into Jasper, who was hiding near the old shed. "Oren, what the hell?" He started, but I grabbed his arm, yanking him toward the road. "We need to go," I gasped, barely able to form the words. "Now." Jasper didn't argue. He must have seen the panic in my eyes, because he immediately dropped his flashlight and followed me. We ran back toward the mobile home, my legs burning with every step. Behind us, the cornfield was silent again, but I knew that thing, whatever it was still out there. We didn't stop until we reached the porch, both of us panting and out of breath. Luca arrived moments later, confused and irritated. "What the hell? I wasn't done counting!" I stared at him, my chest still heaving. "There was someone in the cornfield," Luca frowned. What are you talking about? I saw him, I insisted. He was just standing there. He asked if he could play with us. Luca's face went pale. That's not funny, Oren. I'm not joking, I snapped, my voice shaking. I'm telling you, there was someone else out there. Jasper looked between us, his eyes wide with fear. We shouldn't have gone back there. I knew it. We hurried inside, locking the door behind us. When we told our parents what happened, they were confused at first, then concerned. My dad frowned, listening carefully as I described what I'd seen. But when I mentioned the voice, the way it whispered that awful question, his face darkened. He didn't say anything right away, just told us to stay inside for the rest of the night. The next morning, he was unusually quiet, but I noticed him and Mom having a hushed conversation. After that, they wouldn't let us go near the old house again. Dad even boarded up the back door, saying it was to keep the critters out. But I knew better. We never saw that figure again, but the memory haunted me for years. Eventually, we sold the vacation home, and I never went back to Hollywood, South Carolina.